Hello students, this video is about adding and subtracting measurements using feet and inches. In order to add measurements actually and subtract, we have to remember what we talked about a while back about fractions. So these fractions, 1/4 and 3/8, in order to add these together we have to get a common denominator. The common denominator in this case would be 8. And we've got to change these fractions over like we did before and say 4 times 2 is what gives you 8. So 1 times 2 is 2. And this one down here is actually already an 8, so it's going to stay a 3/8. So when you add these fractions together, we would add our numerators together and get 5/8. And then our fraction parts are done. We're going to move on to our inches. This 6 and the 11, we'll add those together and get 17. And I know that 17 seems a little bit weird. We'll fix that here in the end. And we'll go ahead and add the 5 feet and the 3 feet to get 8 feet. Now, to make this measurement better, we have to take care of this 17. How many inches are in a foot? There's 12 inches in a foot. So if we take 12 of these away, that would leave us with 5 inches. And those 12 inches would turn into another foot. So our best measurement for this would be 9 feet, 5 5/8 inches. Alright, so subtraction is done a little bit different, or might run into a few more baubles. This problem that we're going to do first is an easy one with no real trouble or extra things that we need to do. But we do need to remember again what we talked about with fractions, that when you add or subtract a fraction, you have to have a common denominator. In this case, common denominator could be 16. And we've got to change over our fractions like we did before. And we say 2 times 8 is what makes that 16. So we would do 1 times 8 is 8. And down below, this is already a 16, so it's just going to stay a 1/16. Now when you subtract, we would subtract our numerators and get 7/16. And our fraction parts are done. We're going to move on and subtract the inches, 3 and 2, that would leave us with 1 inch. And then we're going to do our feet. 3 minus 1 is 2 feet. Alright, so this is another subtraction one where we're going to run into a little bit of a bobble that we need to handle. But the first thing, again, we need to do our common denominator with our fractions. Our common denominator here would be 16. And we change over our fractions. The top one we would have to multiply by 8. The bottom one's already a 16, so it's just going to stay 3/16. And to subtract those fractions, we would take 8 minus 3 to get 5/16. Now when we come over here to do the inches, we can't subtract 3 minus 10, so we have to borrow. And when you're borrowing with feet and inches, you take from this foot measurement and you take 1 foot away. And actually when you borrow a foot, you're actually borrowing 12 inches with that foot. So 12 inches gets added to this 3 that we have, and it's going to make 15 inches. So now we can do 15 minus 10 would be 5. And we can come out here and do 5 minus 4, so it would be 1 foot, 5 5/16 of an inch. This subtraction problem is the most difficult subtraction problem that you would come across. But when we're first doing it, again, we have to take care of our fractions. Now, our fractions, the common denominator here would be 8. And we change over our fractions. 2 times 4 gives you 8, so 1 times 4 would put a 4 here. And this one's already an 8, so we're just going to keep a 3. When you go to subtract, we can't do 3 minus 4, so we have to borrow with our fractions, not even taking into consideration the rest of this problem. The way you borrow with fractions is that you take from this 4 and you take 1 away from it. That 1, when you bring it over here, would be 8/8. Do you guys agree that 8 over 8 would be the same as 1? So on top, we had 3/8, and we borrowed an 8/8. On top, this would be 11/8. You can always go back and look at the videos on fractions to solidify your understanding about borrowing with the fractions. But now we can subtract 11 minus 4 would be 7/8. And our fractions taken care of. Now when we go to our look at our whole number of inches, we've got 3 minus 10. We can't do this 3 minus 10. It's like the other problem that I just did. We have to borrow from the feet. And we borrow 1 whole foot. When we borrow 1 whole foot, it actually adds 12 to that 3. So instead of having 3 inches, we would now have 15 inches. And we can take 15 minus 10 to give us 5. Now our inches are done, and we look out to our feet. 3 minus 1 would be 2 feet, 5 7/8 inches. You might need to rewind that part of the video to understand where all the borrowing came into play, but we're going to be practicing adding and subtracting measurements because we are going to be starting to look at blueprints and finding missing pieces of information on blueprints. Please answer the questions on the Google quiz. If you have any problems, please email me at cjones@ictc.edu. All right, I hope you guys have a great day, and I'll see you next week. Bye.